We have a wonderful program, but I would be amiss if I didn't thank the brains behind all of this that really got us started a whole year ago, and that would be Miss Jill Corral. Last year, we met Tracy through this very venue. I don't know if you were in the same room. Were you here in Live Oak last year? I missed it because I was down in South Florida with my dad, who was turning 80, and we took him hot air balloon riding. It was on his bucket list. And so for that reason, people forgave me because I missed the panel last year. But I'm just delighted because Jill encouraged us to keep the spot open with On Top of the World. So thank you to On Top of the World for hosting us again. Master the possibilities. Master the possibilities. Yes. Big round of applause. Thank you, Sherry, for the help behind the scenes.
Yeah. She's supposed to be attending class. She's actually working right now.
Yeah. She's been here early and helped us get set up. And so we have a wonderful 2-hour block, although nobody is using the room afterwards. So if we want to stay and mix and mingle and keep talking, we can do that, I believe. Correct? Okay. So at 3, the official program will end. But again, if you feel compelled, you want to stay, feel free to stay. We'll mix and mingle. Nobody's going to rush us off. If you could silence your cell phone at this point, that would be awesome. And if at any time you need to use the restroom, that would be through this front door and straight across the hall.
There's 2 doors out there too, so any 3 doors will get you there.
Gotcha. Any 3 doors will get you there, but they're technically
right outside
this front door, okay? I have just a general question. Would we like to take just a very short minute? Tell us if you have been to events like these in the past, either the one last year or the February 4th Candid Conversations at the College of Central Florida. Raise your hands if you've been to those kinds of events. Good. If you've never been to one of these events, we are going to give you some options for participation along the way toward the end. Okay, so just look for those. The back table, do you want to say anything special about information on the back table?
If they haven't picked up their evaluation forms, or unless they didn't get them, I just have them here now, so before you leave, please pick up one.
Okay, so Sherry's got evaluation forms on the back table if you didn't get one already. You have some sweet notes on your seats. Those came from an old calendar of mine. I cut off the calendar part and cut off the sweet notes and brought those just to set the tone. We are so glad you're here. Give yourselves a hand. We want to start off with just a minute or two from each of the 4 of us panelists, just why we're here and what our vision is. I came to Florida in 2003 from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I had participated in something called the Institutes for Healing Racism. And those were based on a book by Nathan Rudstein that you can still find on Amazon. That's absolutely excellent. Oh, sorry, I have my cheat sheet in the way. Here we go. Healing Racism in America by Nathan Rudstein. Fantastic read. They took his model for group work in the community from the back of the book, and a bunch of folks, business folks, folks from across different sectors in the community, brought people together in groups of no more than 20, one night a week for about 12 weeks, to sort of tear away the layers of the onion around racism in America and talk about healing racism. So that's really where in almost 20 years ago, in the early 2000s, I started to really think and look more deeply. And along with that, look at things like their definition. Racism equals prejudice plus power, just to give people sort of in the community a working definition that could be a starting point. Concepts like white privilege, institutional racism. So I really started my own learning journey not quite 20 years ago, but one of the things we did was make the commitment to continue working, not to hide our lights under a bushel, but to keep working in the communities that we found ourselves in. And so when I came to Florida, I started teaching for the University of South Florida in Tampa, and I did a class for the Honors College there that was a full 16-week class on healing racism in America, and it predated Barack Obama's presidency. And I was actually able to meet him and introduce him when he came to the Cuban Club in Tampa to speak. So that was exciting. And I think just we have such an opportunity to continue being color brave, and we'll see that in a minute, being color brave and wherever we find ourselves to continue to network and continue to work and continue to stay positive and hopeful and joyful in the journey. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Bert Perkins.
Good morning, or no, good afternoon. I'm still sleeping. This is Monday. I should be home sleeping. I'm retired. I don't want to risk you guys. I keep telling myself that. My husband keeps reminding me I'm working more now than I worked before.
There's a camera if you're here.
I'm sorry.
Stay still.
You know, we need to put some tape down here so that we can just stay within our little box area. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bert Perkins. I'm a resident here at On Top of the World. My husband and I retired here about 3 years ago, and I immediately got involved. And not because I saw that there was a big need, it's just because I'm crazy like that, and I do it everywhere I go. When we retired in 2006 and moved to Georgia, I immediately got involved in the small community that we retired to, Greensboro, Georgia, in case any of you know. Greensboro has less than 20,000 in the county, but they, and their population shifted, was normally around 40% black, but the majority of those that were moving in were wealthy whites that were moving on the other side of the freeway because they had Georgia Power had come in and built a lake. And so the properties that used to belong to the black community in Greensboro were all purchased for nothing. And then they put this lake in and they sold these gorgeous, big, beautiful homes for in the millions. So you know, just by thinking about it, how that shifted everything in that small county. It shifted all the dynamics, all the education process, the political process, everything shifted. The taxes, obviously, the taxes went up. So I got involved, and my husband and I lived on that side of the lake. So it was very unusual for those of us that lived on that side of the lake to go on the other side of the freeway and be a part of the community. So naturally, they were all questioning, well, why are you over here? What are you doing over here? You know, I mean, we have our own little community. So they were very outsiders. You know, why would you want to get involved? Why would you want to try and help us out on this side? They had a small NAACP, and so I got heavily involved as the chair of the education and brought together the school district and the community by offering to promote that the students do community service. So we started a community service organization, and when I left, it was still going on, where every year the 9th through 12th graders did 20 hours of community service in the community. So that meant that they went to both sides of the lake because there were nursing homes on both sides of the lake, there was housing, that there were older people, elders that needed assistance. So it really brought the community together, believe it or not. And when we had our first Freedom Fund event, the NAACP's largest annual event every year, it was the first time it was attended by people from both sides of the community, and it was totally sponsored by Publix. So it was really, so you saw then, I saw then that you can work with people, and because it doesn't matter who you are, you have something in common with that person across the aisle. You do have, you just got to find out what that is. So my question for all of you is, when was the last time you had dinner with someone who doesn't look like you, who doesn't come from your environment, who doesn't speak maybe even the same language, who was raised in a completely different community or a completely different culture than you? That's when you find out who people are. I don't know if any of you have, are familiar with Arthur Malcolm Gladwell. Okay, I've read several of his books. And Malcolm Gladwell, and I'm reading right now Talking to Strangers. And he opens his book talking about the Sandra Bland incident in Texas. And that's available for any of you who haven't seen it. It is available on YouTube. You can go out there and listen to his their entire conversation as he pulled her over. And what it all comes down to is they weren't talking to each other. They were talking at each other. He was talking at her, and she was supposed to respond immediately. But it showed the difference in how our cultural upbringing comes to play when we meet strangers. You know, how often do you just reach your hand out and say, hey, how you doing? You know, when somebody goes by you who doesn't look like you, you know? Actually, that happens, and it needs to happen more regularly, because that's the only way that we will get across what racism really is. It's only when you start having conversations with one-on-one individuals, and you can tell them, well, this is how I grew up. This is what my culture taught me. This is what I was exposed to. How about you? What did you see any of that? Well, no. I was fortunate, I think about it fortunate now as I age. I was raised in a predominantly black community. I was born and raised in Louisiana. I was surrounded by my family and relatives until I got like in middle school. I didn't know what racism was until I hit the big world. And then I find myself as an educated black woman working in an environment predominantly white men, because I was in a field that you didn't find a lot of women, and you didn't find a lot of black women for sure. So when we talk about the Me Too movement and sexual harassment and all that stuff, those ladies would not have survived what I went through. They would not have survived it, because you had to know when to take it seriously and when to walk away. So, you know, that's why I come here, and I'm hoping that my presidency in the Bridges will enlarge group scope. That's what I want to do. I mean, it was formed on a basis of finding answers for why people would salute, you know, old monuments and Confederacy and stuff. But we've moved beyond that, and we didn't forget that, but we're trying to take in all the issues that surround racism. So that's one of the things that our organization is really pushing for. So I invite all of you to attend, and this is going to be a wonderful workshop, because we get a chance to hear from you, as we are always up here talking, but we get a chance to hear your views and your input and your feedback. And we want that, because the only way to heal racism is to talk one-on-one with each other. That's purely the only way. And if you haven't read Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote Outliers, he wrote Blink, I mean, you know, I've been kind of like following his path on his writing, and he's really good. So with that, I will hand it over to Jill.
Now I'll stand right here. This is my place. I didn't know what I didn't know. I grew up in a white neighborhood, and we didn't know what racism was. And in fact, there was a point where maybe as I was getting into 2 digits of age, I thought, you know, there was this thing, civil rights, and everything's fine now. We didn't have any problems where I was, so I didn't know. Well, over time, I did see there were some problems, some systemic problems and personal face-to-face problems, but it wasn't until my husband and I moved here to On Top of the World, and on the date of June 17th, 2017, I attended a Master the Possibilities program called Juneteenth. And I met Miss Burt. And Miss Burt mentioned Bridges Project. And as a result, I joined the Bridges Project. And the good news, bad news is that as a result, as I became more and more educated about racism in this country, it was horrifying, heartbreaking, and I was filled with hope at the same time. While I was learning this, that it was being taught, I was learning truth, I was meeting other people who cared about the truth and learning truth, learning true history. And I started saying, you know, I never liked my history classes in school, and now I know they were lying to me, so I'm glad I didn't listen. In fact, I want to change all the textbooks. That's my goal. I want to change the narrative. I want to change the truth-telling in this country. And that's part of what I do in the Bridges Project in the Chainbreakers group. So I've participated in a lot of different events and projects through them. And at one point, I said, you know, do you guys know about Master the Possibilities? You know, this is a venue where we can spread the word and share this consciousness of truth and caring and empathy and growing and learning. So it began this fantastic set of wonderful events. We'll continue to have more events, and we'll keep you in the know if you're interested. And I will pass this microphone on to Miss Tracy, who, you know, it started with Bert, it went to Jill, it went to Tracy, and it's like, and each person tells 200 people, and each of those tells 200 people, and this is really growing. It's a miracle, and it's beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy, and I'm delighted to see all of you here. There's something about when you see groups of people come together in every color variation for a cause, for a common reason, to explore, to talk, to learn, to share. And I was in your seat out there in the audience last year. Right around, I think, this same time, beginning of October. I zoomed in at the end. I was just getting in before the panel discussion was going to start, and I had no idea what I was in for. But it was something, when I saw the title, I thought, you know, I want to come to this. I want to know what's going on in this community, because I had only been here for about a year or two. And I have to tell you that sitting in the audience, I heard things that broke my heart. I heard things that opened my eyes, and I heard things that made me so angry I wanted to do something. Have you ever been in a position where you've had those experiences? Yeah. So I was sitting right where you were last year, and Miss Jill is the one who got me involved, so it's all her fault. I'm just going to warn you about her right now. And she said to me, they made an announcement they were going to be doing an event at College of Central Florida in February, and that their goal was to really bring the community, as many people as they could, together to openly talk about something that's really hard to talk about. Let's be honest, show of hands, how many of you love talking about racism? Some of you are like, no, not really. It's super uncomfortable, is it not? It's really uncomfortable. We do it, but it's not our favorite thing to do. And it's easier to do in groups like this, right? Because we know we all want to talk about it. Right, so it's a little bit easier. So when they made that announcement, I thought, well, I'd like to know more about that. So silly me, I decided to inquire. I sent an email and I said, I'd like to know more about that. Now, word to the wise. Watch when you inquire about things, because that turned into me project managing something, that event, which I am so proud of. That event was wonderful. If you got a chance to go to it, it was a labor of love, truly.
You did an awesome job.
Thank you. Many hours. But what gives me hope about all of this is that when I saw that room filled, the capacity is supposed to be 333 people, and we're going to say that that's how many people were in the room, per fire code. But it was full, like people were out in the lobby, okay? When I saw people coming together, and I mean talking and really sharing, I mean like being open about their experiences and what they're learning, it made me so happy. And it made me happy that I took my anger, my frustration, and I put it into something positive. And so that's what I hope you get out of this. We're going to be talking about being colorblind as opposed to being colorblind. We can all see color, and color is a beautiful thing in my opinion. Okay? So that's what we're going to be here. And I'm hoping that from this, you're going to feel inspired to want to join in a way that gives you power back, right? Because when we feel like we're empowered to do something, then we feel like we're on purpose. And so I'm hoping that's what happens here today. So thank you so much for coming, and we will continue on with the next part. Yeah? So we're actually going to watch a short TED Talk. Some of you have seen this TED Talk before. By show of hands, how many of you have seen this TED Talk, colorblind or colorbrain?
And I have pens and paper
Okay.
if you want to take notes.
Yeah, or there's lots of notes actually already taken for you on your handout. This was something that Cynthia did a synopsis of. But if you've never seen this before, you're going to thoroughly enjoy it. I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy it. So I'm going to, we're going to lower the lights. So Ms. Burt, could you, I think the light switch is over there. And we're going to lower the lights and we're going to put this, okay, all right. So it's movie time, sorry, no popcorn. You're just going to have to bear with it. If you brought snacks, please share. All right, let's see here. I can do what he taught me. Okay. Here we go. Oh no, here we don't go. It's frozen. Hold on. I think I do something, so hold on everybody. Uh-oh.
You need a light, Tracy?
No, I just need to learn how to work this. No light needed. No, I'm gonna have to do it this way. All right, and I'm still not seeing it on the screen because it's moved up. We had this all fixed before, so do you know how to make it mirror on the screen? We had it all fixed, and
This next to you.
yeah, so actually I'm gonna close this down, I'm gonna try it. So guys, bear with me for a second, we're having technical difficulty, mostly Tracy difficulty, but. Yeah, so I just. This is what I want. Okay, hang with me guys. All right. Yay! Woo!
Good job, Tracy.
Thank you.
So it's 2006. My friend Harold Ford calls me. He's running for U.S. Senate in Tennessee. And he says, Melody, I desperately need some national press. Do you have any ideas? So I had an idea. I called a friend who was in New York at one of the most successful media companies in the world. And she said, why don't we host an editorial board lunch for Harold? You come with him. Harold and I arrive in New York. We are in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. And we get to the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. She motions for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a stark room, at which point she looks at us and she says, where are your uniforms? Just as this happens, my friend rushes in. The blood drains from her face. There are literally no words, right? And I look at her and I say, now, don't you think we need more than one black person in the U.S. Senate? Now, Harold and I, we still laugh about that story. And in many ways, the moment caught me off guard, but deep down inside, I actually wasn't surprised. And I wasn't surprised because of something my mother taught me about 30 years before. You see, my mother was ruthlessly realistic. I remember one day coming home from a birthday party where I was the only black kid invited, and instead of asking me the normal motherly questions like, did you have fun, or how was the cake? My mother looked at me and she said, how did they treat you? I was 7. I did not understand. I mean, why would anyone treat me differently? But she knew. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, they will not always treat you well. Now, race is one of those topics in America that makes people extraordinarily uncomfortable. You bring it up at a dinner party or in a workplace environment, it is literally the conversational equivalent of touching the third rail. There is shock, followed by a long silence. And even coming here today, I told some friends and colleagues that I plan to talk about race, And they warned me, they told me, don't do it. There'd be huge risks in me talking about this topic. That people might think I'm a militant black woman and I would ruin my career. And I have to tell you, I actually for a moment was a bit afraid. Then I realized the first step to solving any problem is to not hide from it. And the first step to any form of action is awareness. And so I decided to actually talk about race. And I decided that if I came here and shared with you some of my experiences, then maybe we could all be a little less anxious and a little more bold in our conversations about race. Now, I know there are people out there who will say that the election of Barack Obama meant that it was the end of racial discrimination for all eternity, right? But I work in the investment business, and we have a saying: the numbers do not lie. And here, there are significant, quantifiable racial disparities that cannot be ignored in household wealth, household income, job opportunities, healthcare. One example from corporate America: even though white men make up just 30% of the US population, they hold 70% of all corporate board seats. Of this Fortune 250, there are only 7 CEOs that are minorities. And of the thousands of publicly traded companies today, thousands, only 2 are chaired by black women. And you're looking at one of them, the same one who not too long ago was nearly mistaken for ancient help. So that is a fact. Now, I have this thought experience that I play with myself, experiment. And I say, imagine if I walked you into a room and it was of a major corporation like ExxonMobil, and every single person around the boardroom were black, you would think that were weird. But if I walked you into a Fortune 500 company and every around the table is a white male, when will it be that we think that's weird too? And I know how we got here. I know how we got here. You know, there was institutionalized and one time legalized discrimination in our country. There's no question about it. But I still, as I sort of grapple with this issue, my mother's question hangs in the air for me. How did they treat you? No, I do not raise this issue to complain or in any way elicit any kind of sympathy. I have succeeded in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I've been treated well by people of all races more often than I have not. I tell the uniform story because it happened. I cite those statistics around corporate board diversity because they are real. And I stand here today talking about this issue of racial discrimination because I believe it threatens to rob another generation of all the opportunities that all of us want for all of our children, no matter what their color or where they come from. And I think it also threatens to hold back businesses. You see, researchers have coined this term color blindness to describe a learned behavior where we pretend that we don't notice race. If you happen to be surrounded by a bunch of people who look like you, that's purely accidental. Now, color blindness, in my view, doesn't mean that there's no racial discrimination and there's fairness. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't ensure it. In my view, color blindness is very dangerous because it means we're ignoring the problem. There was a corporate study that said that instead of avoiding race, the really smart corporations actually deal with it head on. They actually recognize that embracing diversity means recognizing all races, including the majority one. But I'll be the first one to tell you, this subject matter can be hard, awkward, uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. In the spirit of debunking racial stereotypes, the one that black people don't like to swim, I'm going to tell you how much I love to swim. I love to swim so much that as an adult, I swim with a coach. And one day my coach had me do a drill where I had to swim to one end of a 25-meter pool without taking a breath. And every single time I failed, I had to start over. And I failed a lot. By the end, I got it, but I got out of the pool, I was exasperated and tired and annoyed. And I said, why are we doing breath-holding exercises? And my coach looked at me and he said, Melody, that was not a breath-holding exercise. That drill was to make you comfortable being uncomfortable. Because that's how most of us spend our days. If we can learn to deal with our discomfort and just relax into it, we'll have a better life. So I think it's time for us to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation about race. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, all of us. If we truly believe in equal rights and equal opportunity in America, I think we have to have real conversations about this issue. We cannot afford to be colorblind. We have to be color brave. We have to be willing, as teachers and parents and entrepreneurs and scientists, we have to be willing to have proactive conversations about race with honesty and understanding and courage. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Because our businesses and our products and our science, our research, all of that will be better with greater diversity. Now, my favorite example of color bravery is a guy named John Skipper. He runs ESPN. He's a North Carolina native, quintessential Southern gentleman, white. He joined ESPN, which already had a culture of inclusion and diversity, but he took it up a notch. He demanded that every open position have a diverse slate of candidates. Now, he says the senior people in the beginning bristled, and they would come to him and say, do you want me to hire the minority, or do you want me to hire the best person for the job? And Skipper says his answers were always the same, yes. And by saying yes to diversity, I honestly believe that ESPN is the most valuable cable franchise in the world. I think that's a part of the secret sauce. Now I can tell you in my own industry, at Ariel Investments, we actually view our diversity as a competitive advantage. And that advantage can extend way beyond business. There's a guy named Scott Page at the University of Michigan. He's the first person to develop a mathematical calculation for diversity. He says if you're trying to solve a really hard problem, really hard, that you should have a diverse group of people, including those with diverse intellects. The example that he gives is the smallpox epidemic. When it was ravaging Europe, they brought together all these scientists and they were stumped. And the beginnings of the cure to the disease came from the most unlikely source, a dairy farmer. A dairy farmer who noticed that the milkmaids were not getting smallpox. And the smallpox vaccination is bovine-based because of that dairy farmer. Now I'm sure you're sitting here and you're saying, I don't run a cable company, I don't run an investment firm, I am not a dairy farmer, what can I do? And I'm telling you, you can be color brave. If you're a part of a hiring process or an admissions process, you can be color brave. If you are trying to solve a really hard problem, you can speak up and be color brave. Now, I know people will say, but that doesn't add up to a lot. But I'm actually asking you to do something really simple. Observe your environment. At work, at school, at home. I'm asking you to look at the people around you purposefully and intentionally. Invite people into your life who don't look like you, don't think like you, don't act like you, don't come from where you come from. And you might find that they will challenge your assumptions and make you grow as a person. You might get powerful new insights from these individuals. Or, like my husband who happens to be white, you might learn that black people, men, women, children, we use body lotion every single day. Now, I also think that this is very important so that the next generation really understands that this progress will help them because they're expecting us to be great role models. But I told you my mother, she was ruthlessly realistic. She was an unbelievable role model. She was the kind of person who got to be the way she was because she was a single mom with 6 kids in Chicago. She was in the real estate business where she worked extraordinarily hard, but oftentimes had a hard time making ends meet. And that meant sometimes we got our phone disconnected, or our lights turned off, or we got evicted. And when we got evicted, sometimes we lived in these small apartments that she owned, sometimes in only 1 or 2 rooms because they weren't completed. And we would heat our bathwater on hot plates. But she never gave up hope, ever. And she never allowed us to give up hope either. This brutal pragmatism that she had, I mean, I was 4 and she told me, Mommy is Santa. She was this brutal pragmatism. She taught me so many lessons. But the most important lesson was that every single day she told me, Melody, you can be anything. Anything. And because of those words, I would wake up at the crack of dawn, and because of those words, I would love school more than anything, and because of those words, when I was on a bus going to school, I dreamed the biggest dreams. And it's because of those words that I stand here right now, full of passion, asking you to be brave for the kids who are dreaming those dreams today. You see, I want them to look at a CEO on television and say, I can be like her, he looks like me. And I want them to know that anything is possible, that they can achieve the highest level that they ever imagined, that they will be welcome in any corporate boardroom, or they can lead any company. You see this idea of being the land of the free and the home of the brave? It's woven into the fabric of America. America, when we have a challenge, we take it head on. We don't shrink away from it. We take a stand. We show courage. So right now, what I'm asking you to do, I'm asking you to show courage. I'm asking you to be bold. As business leaders, I'm asking you not to leave anything on the table. As citizens, I'm asking you not to leave any child behind. I'm asking you not to be colorblind, but to be color brave, so that every child knows that their future matters and their dreams are possible. Thank you.
The way this is going to work, everyone, is that we're going to ask each person to have a representative, like the wonderful Karen there in the blue, Sisters in Blue, that they're going to share something that you guys talked about in your group, sort of like an aha, something maybe that you learned, something that you maybe discovered or remembered or something along those lines. Each group is going to get about 5 minutes to share. So you want to make sure that when a person is talking that we give them our attention so we really can benefit and hear what they have to say. So with that, Karen, take us away.
Okay, our group everybody had an aha moment, more than one aha moment. And they weren't all from when they were children, some were from when they were children. Some were family stories. Some were from work. Some were from interactions with other people within their family. And then others were world type things. Examples, a family who the grandpa is a staunch racist. The grandma isn't. So the ones that go with grandma or guided by grandma are people welcoming in the world and diverse, where those that are being captured by grandpa are growing up to be racist like grandpa. And it will continue the same trend until grandpa somehow changes his mind. Or in the work environment, looking here in Marion County at the forest, where there's no black people in the forest, or there were not, but there was a bank there, and someone had to be put there. And not knowing it would not have been safe or the right thing at that time to send a lone black manager out there by themselves. Of the aha of someone saying that to you, to say, don't send a black person. Or I'm working at a bank and I'm trying to get in this door and I happen to be Hispanic and the door is locked. I can't get in, and one of my coworkers says, aren't you Hispanic? Aren't you Hispanic? You can get in that door, can't you? And didn't think anything of it. It's more examples of like on that and of family histories being gathered, and once the picture is sent, then you don't get responded to anymore if it goes to a person of a different color, because they don't want you in their family, even though your blood says you are part of that family. Being the first black person in a certain job, and sooner or later someone says, so how did you get there? Who do you know? Who did you sleep with? The aha moments, and they're here now, and they won't go away, but that's why we're here talking.
You can just pass the group next to you. Thank you. You got it. You can do it.
We had an interesting development in this group. Of course, when we initially started to go around the room, there was a little reluctance to speak, but after a while, we began to see a pattern forming, and it came kind of like regional understanding of people from Vermont, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Syracuse University, Long Island, Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Cleveland. They might have had individual, and there were a couple of individual situations where the cities that they lived in showed a confrontation or a situation with blacks. But because we were all northern people, and you noticed I said northern, not northern, we began to see that there weren't any aha moments for us because we didn't have too many confrontations with blacks and Hispanics. We lived in a white community. We were all white kids growing up and not necessarily intermixing or being associated with blacks in the area. And we began to realize that when we come down here and live, we now can see that there is an abundance of situations that prevail. And we didn't notice that when we were lily white northerners. Thank you.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Rob wants me to tell my name, so like I told them, I'm the brown girl. That's my name. My name is Kienta. You guys can call me Kienta. It's a little easier. We all shared pretty much our lives and what we experienced in our lives. Me, I didn't really experience racism to the extent most of you have. And some of us in the group seem like they didn't really experience that much of racism. If I'm correct, guys, you'll help me out. Right. And Leona. Okay, Leona, she shared a story with us when she worked at nursing. Okay, and she didn't have to deal or experience prejudice, and she wasn't, and her parents told her not to be prejudiced. They did have different neighborhoods. I believe it was Polish, and just different neighborhoods. And when she saw like a black guy walking to her, she wondered, what is he doing here? And then she realized, oh, wait, that shouldn't be there. That thought shouldn't be there because there's no prejudice. She wasn't raised up that way. Also in nursing, she realized that people had a chip on their shoulders, and she realized at that moment that CNAs, and she realized that she felt some sense of prejudice, and she shouldn't have felt that way. When she left, she no longer felt it. But I don't know if that was an aha moment for us or not, but we all experienced pretty much like we didn't discriminate. I guess we all were loved. We all loved.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Well, as I heard the comments, I was thinking of what I was going to say, but what I noticed was where there was a predominance of whites in the group, there were difficulties in finding aha moments. Because we had mostly black in this group, we had a million stories. We could have gone around about 20 times. And I will add that my dear friend Mary has been with us so much that I said, gee, we don't have any white people in the group. So anyway, most of it was our own personal stories that were from a child as well as continue to today, through today, I should say. A lot of negative expectations, a lot of negative assumptions about all of us. And the unfortunate thing is, for me, my granddaughter, I was concerned. My back was up the other day because I was concerned about her being mistreated because she was black. And so my point is we are sharing now stories of our children's experiences. So as I said, it continuously goes on. It has not ended, as she said. That's why I will reiterate, this is so important. For me, it's so important. One of the points that we talked about was people, black people, not speaking out. And Audrey shared her experience of Martin Luther King, and that some black people were supportive of him originally. And what my experience in Atlanta was, I know it sounds surprising, but it was out of fear, because back in the day, when I was young, if you spoke out, you got beaten up, killed, shot, lynched, whatever. Yes. And so people were, it was ingrained in people not to protest, not to speak out, not to express yourself. I was scared to death to talk about things that happened to me, and there were many. So it was a different generation, so I'm glad we're talking now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Mangelman. I don't know why I have this mic, but I'm going to try to do the best I can. We have a pretty good diversity up here, and we share quite a bit. We have, to piggyback on something Phyllis just said, is that if the group was primarily white, the experiences are different. But with this group, we've got quarter and a quarter and a quarter where we all came from. We've got Southerns, we've got people who grew up in all white neighborhoods that were not. I guess our aha moment here is that a lot of what we come to believe and grow up with is based on what we were around and what was instilled in us as we grew. If we never saw blacks, Hispanics, or people of color in our neighborhood, and it was never something we had to address, then the thought of racial inequality or bias issues never came into our mind. If by chance someone did come into the neighborhood that didn't look like you, didn't act like you or in your school, then the question would come up. Those of us that were raised in the South, I was raised in the South, and one of the things I shared in listening to Melody was at 9 years old when my school in Prince Edward County, Virginia, was closed down for 5 years because they refused to integrate the schools. And that's an aha moment that as I've gotten older, it has more meaning. It has more of a hurtful thing. And the question of why? Why was I not good enough to sit next to your child? You know, to sit next to your daughter. So I guess right now, as we've gotten older, the best aha moment that we can do is to try to learn to get along with one another, understand one another, talk to one another, not prejudge one another based on what you might have learned many, many years ago. And at this season in our life, we have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren that are now being affected by the biases and the prejudice that we have passed on. And it's time for all of that to change, to make this world better, for us to live peacefully among one another. We're all, and I'm going to go here, we're all children of one master. And we all bleed the same blood. You know, everyone in here has something in common. everybody have children the same way, make children the same way, love children the same way. There's just no difference. So, you know, that's my aha moment. That's it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Hortensia Owens, and I'm representing this great group because this is a diverse group. We have Chinese, we have white, I'm from the Caribbean, I'm from Aruba, and we all had some aha moments. One of the things that, excuse me, that we shared is how, it's how these things are happening even now. And like she said, people see your glory, they don't know your story. That happens to be the name of my book. I'm also an author. However, one of the things that we talked about too is I'm also a retired nurse. And my first aha moment was when I went to my patient and I introduced myself, I'll be your nurse today. And she looked up at me and she says, I don't want a black nurse. And I said, okay, I'll find a white nurse when you're having chest pain. But basically what I'm saying, I've only been here in Ocala 11 months. And I've experienced racism 3 times already. But you have to be, like the title says, you have to be color brave. And I'm not color blind, I am color brave because I don't have a problem with confrontation. But as my friend says, you have to let people know how they're treating you without being rude. You know, and if that's what you have to let them realize, you don't even know me. Why are you treating me this way? And it kind of brings them down a little because they realize she's right. So I'm black and bald-headed, but I can help you if you treat me like a person. And so this lady, she experienced her racism because she's Chinese. And her experience was with someone that's Indian. And so, you know, and I can't remember all of the stories, but a child learns what they live. Yes. And if you treat a child a certain way, that child is looking up to you. That child is saying, well, if my mom did it, it must be okay. But it's not. This lady experienced it in the military. A female soldier as opposed to a male soldier. So it's still racism with gender, color, if you're rich or poor, and we have to stop. We have to stop. When I came here, they said, you going to Ocala? You know, that's a white city. And I said, yeah, and? So basically, like we all shared our experiences, it's gotta stop. We have to be color brave.
Thank you so much, everybody. We have, I believe, a few extra minutes. Jill had something that she wanted to share with us. So I'm going to pass the microphone.
Are we going to need these groups anymore?
If you want to face forward, you can.
Reorganize. It's not as much as like.
Are you good?
Here's your chair.
I don't know if you need that or not.
You okay?
That's right, I got
Okay.
So thank you all for your amazing sharings among your people in your group and then to the group as a whole, because it makes a huge difference to hear one another, to know one another, and be known. This is a powerful healing that takes place right in this room. When I went to Montgomery, Alabama with the Unitarians last year, I got to go to the Legacy Museum and what's known as the Lynching Museum, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. I got me a calendar or history of racial injustice in case you want to read one a day. 365 of them. There's millions of them. And my friend lent me her copy of the New York Times magazine, the 1619 Project, which is heartbreaking, but it's part of the education, part of the knowing, part of really hearing and grokking what's been going on and what's still going on, what needs to be addressed. Well, I recently listened to an audiobook in my car because I love to listen to stories and books. And one piece in the book went ding, 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 ding for me because it mirrored for me what my passion is about changing the narrative, changing the story from the lies that are these whitewashed versions of where we're at to moving it to the truth. So I wanted to share that with you today. But first, I just want to hold up this little postcard that I got at one of these museums where Brian Stevenson, who's my hero, who started Equal Justice Initiative, he says, the opposite of poverty is not wealth, the opposite of poverty is justice. And I love this so much, I have a handful of them, so I don't have enough for everybody, but I do have some extras, so if you want one, you might be able to get one here today. So I'll get my, first come, first served. Yeah, first come, first served. I got a whole pile of them. I had to buy stuff. It's like, anyway. So I just want to share my experience with what I heard in this audiobook that moved me so much and gave voice to what's inside me that sometimes I can't find the right words to express it. The book was called Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. And it's a scene that's set in 1961 where a teenager is asking an Indian, in quotes, a Native American, why he had been in jail. And his response was that he was in jail for telling the truth about a Dakota tribe's uprising in 1862. Well, the boy asked, why would that be a reason for going to jail? And this was his answer. His name was Warren Redstone. And here's Warren Redstone's reply. Our people were starving. The whites trespassed on our land, feeding our grass to their animals, cutting our trees for their houses, shooting what little game we still had. Our crops failed, and the winter was hard, hard. We asked for the food the whites had promised us in the treaty we'd signed. Know what they said to our starving people? They said, let them eat grass. Sure, we fought. We fought for food. We fought because promises were broken. We fought because we refused to be crushed under the boots of the whites. The man who told us to eat grass, he was killed. And our warriors stuffed grass into his mouth. It was a hopeless thing we tried to do because the whites, they had soldiers and guns and money and newspapers that repeated all the lies. In the end, our people lost everything and were sent away from here. 38 of our warriors were hung in one day, and the whites who watched it cheered. I spoke the truth, and for that, I was labeled a troublemaker and put in jail. That's how they get away with it. Well, when I felt the power of that novel's message in that heartbreaking way, for the Native Americans, for people of color, for immigrants, for anyone considered a threat to whites who use power over others to maintain privileged status, we call them white supremacists, or racists, or greedy capitalists. They are the ones who have been maintaining a whitewashed narrative of history that programs our children through school textbooks and the media, keeping inequities in place. Up until now, the whites have had the soldiers and the guns and the money and the newspapers that repeated all the lies. But now, we have an opportunity to be truth tellers. We can learn and share the truth of post-slavery forms of racial oppression. We can vote for leaders at all levels of government who can bring healing to our history of slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and the daily microaggressions in communities that maintain lies about the nature of human beings' worth. By joining the Chainbreakers work group in the Bridges Project, and you can find us at marionbridges.com, I have dedicated myself to joining in efforts to take back the narrative by remembering and telling the truth of our nation's history. The truth is, and the truth must be told if there is ever going to be healing between people of various skin colors and tones. Whites are in need of healing also from multi-generational unconscious guilt that shows up as fear, anger, and various forms of prejudice. We are here to continue the conversation between us and learn ways to be color brave. Together, let's heal the world. Thank you.
Correction, marionbridges.net.
But .com will lead you right
Does
to
it really?
.net. Yes, you
Good
can
to
do .com or .net. The original was .net, and they created a link, so you could do marionbridges.com or .net, and you'll go to the same place. Yes.
Hey, Jill.
Yes.
You putting that in the paper?
You should.
Oh, there's an idea, okay. I can do that. I've been published before, I can do it again. Are there questions? Are there comments? Is there more sharing here? Here's a juicy.
Generally, I understand this from a northerner's point of view. Okay, so I grew up in an upper middle class white neighborhood. We were Jews, but our neighborhood, about half and half, didn't find any prejudice there. But I realize now as an adult, although I didn't see it, I was colorblind. There was plenty of stuff going on. I mean, we had housekeepers that were black. We loved them, you know, it wasn't anything that they were horrible people, but the valedictorian of the school wasn't black. You know, they were like a subculture. And for example, if you go into a restaurant, maybe the waiters were all white, but the busboys were all black. Things like that. Still in hospitals today, we see a lot of white nurses, black CNAs. This is pervasive, and just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
So we're going to go on to the next piece. So many of you might be thinking, all right, so we've had some good, did you guys enjoy sharing with each other? Did you actually enjoy talking with one another? It's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do. So you might be thinking, okay, what can I do and how can I help? Okay, and so we're going to give you ways to do that. So one of the things that's going to happen right now is Cynthia is going to pass out a survey. The survey is, let me see here, it's Healing Racism in America survey, and this is for them to do now? No.
Let me just give a 15-second preview because I want Ms. Burt to have my time, okay? I developed this about
15 years ago down in the Tampa Bay area and presented it to an American Society of Training Development, now branded Talent Development, professional group meeting, to introduce them to some concepts that we had talked about up in Michigan when we went through the Institutes for Healing Racism. You can use this as a tool. You may not like all the questions. You can change them. All I wanted was to give that group and then subsequent groups. I give this to my students at CF, for example, and say, here's a conversation starter. The reason that I like the way this survey is crafted, though, is because it doesn't just ask rate on a scale questions. It also has fill in the blanks, because we all want to see ourselves as doing these things. But can you list what you're doing, okay, to bridge your world with another person's? And so feel free to use this as you will, recreate it. It's a tool, okay? Nope, this is for you to take home.
All right, so the handouts, the survey's coming around, so if you haven't gotten them, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that the survey comes around to you. And again, this is for you to do later on. And I think one of the best ways to grow in life is to do some self-observation. What do you guys think? And to be honest, right? Sometimes it's kind of hard to be honest about yourself. It can definitely be challenging. Okay, so this next section is all about Miss Burt Perkins. She is going to be doing an activity where you're going to get to identify where you fall or where you rate yourself in the idea of, are you an ally, are you an advocate, or are you an investor in regards to this topic, right? And so she's going to be working here on the blackboard. I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to turn this off. Miss Burt, do you want the microphone, or are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of board work and working with boards as it applies to reorganization and restructuring. When I was in Greensboro, Georgia, I worked to help formulate the food pantry board that was sponsored by Kroger there. And so we brought in a number of individuals that had really wanted to commit to starting a food pantry in the county because it was a great need there. The churches had been trying to do it, and it was sort of overwhelming for them. So we worked out a schedule and made selections from community leaders to come into a workshop where we actually kind of trained them on what they needed to start putting together to respond to the community, not only through food pantry, but through a clothes closet, as well as school supplies for kids, the backpack, lunch backpack program that we brought in. So one of the ways that at the end of the session, we asked all of the participants to rate themselves. And so I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. And I'm going to ask you, where do you fall on a scale as it pertains to being an ally, being an advocate, or being an investor? You've heard a lot of stuff today. You've talked amongst yourselves. You've heard stories. But, you know, we all walk out of here and then we go, eh. As I told you, I think the most effective way is to reach out. Talk to a stranger. Say, hi, how you doing? Hey, what are you guys doing for dinner? You know, everybody eats. Everybody eats. You want to go out for dinner? That's a great way of getting people comfortable with you as an individual and your culture and your history.
She's behind your back.
Perfect. So, we have a scale, and it usually goes from 0 to 100, and 0 to 100, and 0 to 100. Now, where are you? Are you an ally? Do we know what an ally represents? Someone who's willing to talk about, you know, the program. Oh, yeah, we went to this program, and we thought the wording was great. So,
I have some resources I might want to commit, or I might want to do a little investigation and maybe talk to a friend of mine, or do I want to become an advocate? I'm going to support them publicly. I'm going to tell my organization, I'm going to bring them to my clubhouse, I'm going to really get out there and publicly put myself on the line to try and change the conversation of racism. So I'm going to do that. Or am I going to be an investor? And an investor is one who actually invests time, labor, resources into an organization that you feel is doing what you want done in the community. There's a lot of organizations out there, whether it be a food pantry, whether it be Bridges, whether it be the college, whatever it is, there's organizations, women's shelters, prison reform. I mean, there are so many things that you can get involved with. Is that what you want to do? Is that something that you can do? Or maybe you don't want to really invest all that time, money, and energy, and you just want to talk about it and make sure people are aware of its existence. I'm an ally, I'm an investor, I'm an advocate. You can be right in the middle and put your little dot there and say, you know what, I feel like I can be 50% an ally, but I can also be a strong advocate. So this scale tells you, what do you feel like? How do you feel? And it gives you, as well as the rest of us here, now before you come up and put your little dot where you're going to do it, make sure nobody sees you putting that dot on there. They're going to hold you to your feet to the fire. Say, well, you said you were going to be an investor. So where are you? Yeah. So I'm going to ask, starting with Reggie here.
You're on camera.
If you will, just take 1 minute. Think about it right now, where you want to be on that scale. Where you want your little dot to be. I'm going to be a strong advocate, but I'm also going to be an investor at this point.
That's me.
Okay.
Your dot's right there. That's your dot.
That's my dot.
Just step up there and put your dot. And now there's no names on the dot. Just one dot.
One dot.
One dot.
One dot.
One dot. One dot evaluates where you are on this entire scale. Now, he is about 50% of an ally, 50% of an advocate, and he's going to invest about 50% of his time, labor, or whatever. You can be 80%. You can be 80% up here. You can be 0 to 100. You can be 80% as an ally, 80% all the way across here as an advocate, but you can be less of an ally down here. So I can do more. I can do more as an investor. I can do much more as an investor than I can as an ally. I got money. I don't have time. I got money. So where do I want to put my money?
I want that problem.
So it's just a matter of where you want to position yourself.
Is this where we are now?
Where you are now, where you feel
Where
like
you are now,
where
honest,
you
where
feel
we
like you
are
are
now.
right now at this very moment, after all this discussion and stuff. Nobody, you're not putting your name on them, so nobody's going to know for sure unless Vanessa puts it on the camera.
And I stopped recording.
I was definitely an ally. I told you I was in this room, and I was an ally, and before I knew it, I was being talked into being a full-time investor. That's right. Full-time investor, which is a great thing. Which is a great thing. So wherever you are is a wonderful thing. Use it as a tool for awareness. So, and you have your survey. So the last part of this program, I want to talk to you all about the barriers or obstacles that might come up for you. How many of you feel like sometimes you want to be an ally or an advocate or an investor, and yet when you get out there in the world, right, it's different than being in here. When you got buddies, you got pals, you made some new friends, right? When you get out in the world, and maybe you're at a social gathering, right, something like that, and you bump into somebody, and you start a little conversation, just being friendly.
And then the conversation turns to something, and that person says something, and you're like, maybe that's not your exact reaction. You're like, you did not just say that out loud. Like you're thinking it in your head, right? You're thinking, okay, how many of you had this experience? They're like, okay. So I want to spend this time because here's the thing that I have learned. A lot of us find ourselves in these situations. And I'm a big believer that when these situations come up, these challenges come up, there's a wonderful opportunity, actually, that lies right there. And it could be an opportunity for a teaching moment. It could, for both of you, both people, okay? But what I want to know from you is I want to know some of the obstacles or challenges or barriers that you feel like you come up against, and I want to talk about and brainstorm a little bit about what can we do to navigate this? What can you do to navigate this? Because the end goal, even when you come up against these things, is to come out with at least a better understanding. Maybe the other person may not agree with you, but at least they heard you. Does that make sense? They heard you. They heard another perspective, another option, another possibility that this might play out in somebody else's life that they may have never, ever considered before, right? So who's willing to share something that sometimes comes up for them? It could be a recent experience, a barrier, or a challenge. Ms. Phyllis.
Well, my challenge is that I have neighbors who have made comments.
Okay.
Some of the comments made me extremely angry.
Okay.
And because I felt extremely angry, I have avoided talking because I felt like I'm going to curse this lady out.
We've all been there.
Yep. And I mean, I have had teaching moments. There are actually two of them. And I really want them to understand what the problem is, but I think that they are so blinded by their own personal experiences that I can't break through. So even when I say things that say, no, that's not right, they insist on holding to, you know, and since I have to live with these people,
yes,
it would not be in my best interest to say something really nasty.
Right. Okay.
So that's the challenge.
Okay, that's the challenge. Who's got another one? Okay. Yes, Don.
Recently, I went into an establishment, a restaurant, and I noticed that the person did not address me.
Didn't acknowledge you.
Didn't acknowledge me, thank you. And one of the teaching was she may have been having a bad day.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to take it personal. Yeah. So I simply said, because as I said, I don't have a problem with confrontation. And I said to her, are you having a bad day? And she said, no, but with an attitude. And so I said to her, well, then you need an attitude adjustment. She was fine after that. But she may have been having a bad day. And I was the next person she took it out on. So that's why it was a teaching from her.
Okay, good one. Okay, got another one? All right. And I'm going to come back to you, Ms. Phillips, about your neighbor.
One of my challenges is I talked to a certain person regarding race issues, and that person keeps insisting how much better blacks are off today. And I'm trying very, very hard not to get angry, but just to try to understand why they feel that.
Okay, well, that's a good one. We're going to come back to that one.
This could have been a confrontation.
Okay.
I was in Walmart.
Hold the microphone up so they
I
can
was
hear.
in Walmart at the deli counter, and there were several of us standing in line. So this man comes up to me and he says, well, where are you from? I mean, just out of the blue. And I really could have taken that any kind of way. So I very kindly turned to him and said, New York. And then he started telling me he was from the Midwest. So it really is, sometimes we expect one thing and we get something else. because my first thought was to say, none of your damn business. But, I mean, really, because that's how I am.
You're from New
You
York.
know
What are you
that's
talking about?
So, I think sometimes we have to back up and refocus. And think about it before we open our mouths, which is something I really have to work on. But it really could have gone the wrong way. But it did.
I'm glad that you took a breath. You were like, let me read you your rights. Take a number, mister. Okay. So I want to talk about a couple of the ones. So we can all relate to the experiences that people shared, right? Like, yes, where are you from? And, well, things are so much better. Why are you complaining? Right? And neighbors who continue to say things, and you're like, I'm standing right here. And you know that's wrong and hurtful, right? And so the reason I bring this up is in your handout, Bert, Jill, and Cynthia asked me, I think it's on the second page, they've asked me to put this together for ways to sometimes handle some of this. I'm not saying it's going to always work, okay? But it's things that I've learned over the years, having to field a lot of very interesting comments, like what Paula had, where are you from? Or what are you? Well, I'm human, what are you? I mean, but so this, Miss Jill asked me to rename it, and it's Tracy's Tools for a Teaching Moment, and this is really about promoting respect during a challenging conversation. Because here's where I always land with these obstacles and these challenges. If you will choose to present with respect, you're probably going to get a lot farther than copping an attitude or a whole lot of other things. But this requires us to stop. Like Paul said, you got to stop and take a breath and be like, I need to compose myself, right? And so when we talk about, you'll see the very first one on here, pick your battles. Okay, because there are some people like your neighbors that honestly, it may just be, just let them be. You know, some of us, we are very, very married to our beliefs, and we're probably not going to change. So save your energy, your time, and use it on other people, and just, you know, when they say hi or whatever, you just go about your life. And you withdraw from the game, right? There you go, you withdraw from the game. Now, for our lady in the back who said, when people say, you know, things are so much better, may I ask, is this person, what race was this person? White, okay. So here's my delicate subject, okay. So here's what I'm gonna say, it's number three on here. First, seek to understand and then be understood. This is a challenging one for a lot of us. But when you said, are you having a bad day? You kind of were seeking to understand, like, are you doing okay today? Maybe you're having a rough day. And so you're asking somebody, you're sort of doing a little curious investigation, and you want to know. And I think a lot of times if most of us could take a breath and, I don't want to say stop being offended, but sort of put the emotional space between us and the comment to say, how would I like this to go? What would I like the outcome of this to be? Most of us get so quickly triggered that before we know it, something has come right out of our mouth, and now here we are at odds with the other person, right? Like Ms. Paul said, this could have gone all kinds of wrong. There could have been a fight at the counter, right? Over somebody asking where you're from. Right? So when somebody says something like that, and I've heard these conversations before, and let me give you a very brief preface on my background, probably, and why they asked me to do this. They say that I'm really good at this. I don't know that I am, but they say that I am, so I will take that
Believe
as
what they say.
Believe what they say. But my background is I am biracial. I'm what they call mulatto. I'm half black, half white, okay? And so I've had the interesting experience of sort of being able to communicate, I suppose, with both the tribes, if you will. Really, I mean, you know, like I go to one family reunion, it's very different. I go to the other family reunion, it's very different. Very, very different. And it's fine. My family still makes fun of me because I eat barbecue with a fork. Whatever, I don't care. So it's all good. But the reason I say to start, like, to really seek to understand is I'm going to ask all of you to start coming from a place of more curiosity than offense. sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. They don't even realize they're being offensive. They honestly don't. And so you can have an opportunity to say, all right, I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt. They don't know. They can only reference and talk from their own experience, not yours, right? And so you could never know, most of you, what it's like to be like me, to be between two families, two sides. Oh my goodness, sometimes it's crazy, right? But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I have a kind of a unique perspective on things. So in that instance, I would like to use your example. When somebody says, you know, things are so much better, and I would say, tell me more about that. Seriously, that's interesting. Tell me what more about that. And watch your tone, because you might be like, tell me more about that. You think things are better? Oh, do tell me. I am listening. So ready to hear this. Right? But you get what I'm saying, right? So tone has a lot to do with it. So if I said to the person, be like, tell me more about that experience, right? And a lot of times people actually love to talk. Yep. Careful. You're like, but when you ask them, tell me more about the experience, tell me how you've noticed things have gotten better. Tell me what you've noticed. And so when they share with you, you might think, and from their perspective, from where they sit in their life, not having grown up or been through the world as a person of color, that would seem like a completely legitimate and fair thing. So one of the first things we can all do better on is to validate someone's experience, not invalidate it. Because you all know how it feels when somebody invalidates your experience and says, that's not true. How's that feel? It's terrible. It shuts you down and it makes you defensive, right? So ask the question, really? That's interesting. Tell me more about that. And then after they tell you, you can say, you know, that's a really interesting way to look at it. My experience is, and share with them your experience, right? You let them share. You'll have an opportunity most of the time to share as well. And both of you have just learned something about the other person. Most of the time, if you will seek to understand somebody, you will find that middle ground. And when you can find common ground with a person, then you can start to build the bridge of better communication and helping them see things from your viewpoint and vice versa, right? So this little handout here was things that I do on a regular basis when I get asked all kinds of crazy things about myself. Like I told you, one of my favorite ones is, what are you? I have fun with this now. I'm like, well, or I love that one, where are you from? Most people are trying to actually figure out what my nationality or my heritage is, but they don't know how to ask me. So they go, well, where are you from? So sometimes I have fun and say, Earth. Okay. So, and I usually will say, like I wink at them and say Earth, and they're like, oh. And I say, are you trying to ask me what my heritage is? And they're like, yes. And I say, oh, okay. Well, and then I tell them. But a lot of times they say, hey, listen, if you ever are curious about somebody, a nicer way, or a way that it would be easier for you to ask is say, what's your heritage? Tell me about your heritage, right? And so, you know, but sometimes people just don't know. So I have an opportunity to educate. And I think it's a great opportunity. So when you come across things like that, you can get mad. And I'm not telling you not to feel your feelings. Get mad, have your little moment, go to the bathroom, scream, fuss, throw things, whatever you need to do. And then come out and be like, okay, now I can have a conversation with you about this. Does that make sense about how to sometimes navigate around some of these barriers and these obstacles that we come up against with? Because we're people who are conscious, and we're people who are wanting to do something different about it. And a lot of times, it's all about having tools, right? Tools make things so much easier. Yes? All right, very good. Yes, Gorham.
I know we're going to run over, but
that's all right.
Tell me how you handle the panacea of what black folks do to black folks to improve their positions.
That's a good one.
Huh?
That's a good one.
Oh,
it happens every day.
Every day. Only because we are at time.
Yes,
And we have a couple of things, but
Okay.
we have the room until 4 o'clock, I think, because we have nobody in this room after.
Right.
So I'm gonna just,
Well, tell them about this, and then
Jeff.
Gorham, I will
we officially
brave that question.
honor everybody's, because we've been asked, what time do we have to
Yes, officially get out of the room.
wrap up?
Yeah.
3 o'clock. But we want to invite you to continuing the conversation, which we have been doing throughout the year following the February 4th Candid Conversation event. However, we're having a special guest speaker this Friday. And so we normally have some, raise your hand if you've been going to these so people can see. Right. So we can open this up to the group that's here today as well. Donnie Mitchell will be speaking this Friday. So it's kind of a special event for this series.
What?
Yes. It's time to thank everybody, and I'm going to give this back to Tracy, and then she can facilitate. For those of you that want to leave at 3 or need to leave at 3, we want to honor that.
Thank you guys for if you need to go. Oh, and make sure your surveys, those long pieces of paper, Sherry's in the back. There's an envelope. You can just drop them off with her. If you care to continue, stay here and watch me try to field this question.
I want to hear the answers.
Yes. Ramona. Miss Ramona, will you come up here? Or I'm going to come up here, please, Miss Ramona. I've been told I need to introduce you.
Hey.
Lovely lady. Hi, Miss Ramona. Nice to meet you. Would you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ramona Williams.
Hey, guys.
Guys, there you go. Hi, my name is Ramona Williams. I'm with City of Ocala. I'm the community engagement coordinator for the entire city. So if you have any issues, I was so kind to be invited by Vanessa.
She's right there. She's filming.
And Ms. Bird. So I stay in contact with them. They stay in contact with me. We have so much going on within the city. We're dumping $40 million in West Ocala to bring revitalization back to the city. We're trying to get people to move back to that area because it was a black-owned community. It was black doctors, lawyers, dentists. So I'm here to educate as much as possible to bridge that gap between the city and the community, but not just for West Ocala, it's East Ocala, Midtown. So just to let you know, the city isn't a bad place. We have rules, we have laws, we have to govern by, and I'm the person that has to explain it to all the citizens, 60,000 of them. But if you have any questions or concerns, I'm always available. I'll bring back some more cards or Bert or Vanessa will contact you for me. And I'll always return your call. She'll tell you I will. I don't sleep. Nice meeting you guys. Yes.
Thank you for
Coming. All right. If you need to go, don't worry, you're not going to. Oh, you want to hear my answer? I was trying to stall. I'm just kidding. All right. So, to make sure that I heard your question correctly, is what do we do, or how do we handle the situation of how blacks are with blacks in the community?
Blacks dumping on blacks.
Blacks dumping on blacks. Okay. All right. So, whew.
Can
All
I
right.
ask a question?
Absolutely. Please, go ahead. Yes, stall. Keep asking questions.
Can you tell me
What that means? Because I was going to say, because this would fall over, you would not understand this.
You're right.
Okay. So no. So I think what Gorham's trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gorham, is that a lot of times in the black community, and this is not just in the black community, in a lot of Hispanic communities, you will see people being aggressive with each other, being burdensome to one another, holding other people down, pulling them back, not being supportive. Is that what we're talking about?
Or escalating themselves.
Or escalating themselves, one-upping somebody and making sure that you know it. Things like this, okay? So this actually happens in all communities, actually.
It does.
It happens in all communities. This is not like a specific, to a specific race at all. This happens in all communities. And so here's what I would say to that. A lot of that has to do, in my opinion, with ignorance. A lot of it has to do with ignorance. And a lot of it has to do with what I call scarcity thinking. If you feel like there's not enough jobs, there's not enough money, there's not enough resources, there's only room for one person at the top, then you get into this mentality of being very competitive. And if that means you have to step on people or dump on people or pull people back when they're trying to get ahead, then that's what you do. So this is actually more of a mentality thing than a race thing, is my opinion.
Yeah, and it's true because
In my opinion.
they always talk about black on black crime.
Yeah.
But if you look at the statistics, black on black crime is no higher than white on white crime. As a matter of fact, white on white crime is much higher in their communities. But you're going to kill who you are around. If you're a black person and you only live in a black community, who else you going to rob? I mean, serious. You know, that's so there is no higher percentage of black on black crime than there is on Hispanic crime or white on white crime. But because we are black, we look at the statistics in our communities. That would be natural for us to be concerned with those statistics. And unfortunately, the media plays into that. And we all know that the media plays a really high part on what you sink in, what you hear, what you see. They pick and choose because the media is owned by those that want you to get the information they want you to have. Now, just as a slight, I was just going to mention this. One of my favorite shows, who I never miss every Sunday, is Fareed Zakaria, GPS. I love him because he breaks down the previous week's news for me. He puts it in plain English. But he said something. He had one of his guests who was from the, I think it was the World Health Organization that was speaking, and said, you know, people really don't understand where the population swing is going. By the end of this century, 1 in every 3 people will be African. 1 in every 3 people by the end of this century will be African. Not Hispanic, not white, not black, African. Really mixed with African. So we're talking about, if you live to see that, you're talking about a culture shift. I mean, we're just going to have, the whole world is going to be in an upheaval. But those statistics will play themselves out if the current rate of population growth continues the way it's going. The way it's going is there are less and less white babies being born. There are less and less Hispanic babies being born. There are less and less African American babies being born. And I say African American because African Americans are an originating ethnic group from the United States. There are less of them being born, but there are more and more Africans being born every day. They can't even keep count. So the number that we're all talking about all this stuff, black and white, said that shit ain't even gonna matter. I mean, it's not even gonna matter. You know what I mean? But we have to live through this today. So the only way we get through it today is to be kind to one another. We have to be kind to one another. I don't care what's going on around you. You've got to be kind to each other because we got enough stuff that we deal with on a regular basis than to have to worry about racism. Really?
We got other problems.
I mean, we got other problems. So that's just my input.
Hold on.
I learned something by being at the Juneteenth event 2017. One of the things I learned about the generational trauma that is passed on, that has not been healed, that is, you know, possibly very unconscious. I mean, you're not aware that your forebears were in the bottom of a slave ship where they couldn't even stand up or use a bathroom, but it's in the consciousness of the
collective.
The collective, yeah. And so you have unconscious trauma, post-PTSD.
Post-traumatic, they actually call it post-traumatic slave disorder.
Yeah, post-traumatic slave disorder, yeah. And that's a part of what's going on that can't be healed until we start getting honest and open with one another, so that those who ran the breeding farms to breed more slaves after we couldn't get them for free from Africa, and we made them, and then we lynched them if they tried to get uppity or look at a white lady. You know, this is in the unconscious guilt of the white people who are scared of black men because they know that we deserve to be killed for what we did to them. And I'm saying we, like, I'm part of that. But my husband told me I'm not even white, I'm Jewish. So.
Get your own camp.
But my past is white, what can I say? But, you know, all of this conscious and unconscious anger and guilt and fear is passed on and on and on until we get honest to heal this mess. And, you know, we may call it black on black crime or whatever, but it's just a symptom of something that hasn't been healed yet.
My name is Tracy. When you guys, there's one little thing I want to bring to your attention. The other part of your sheet has some resources on it, and this will tie into all of this. There's one on here under videos that says Mark Charles, Race, Trauma, and the Doctrine of Discovery. Please take some time to watch this. It's on your sheet. It's about an hour long, but it will, oh my. We'll put some things in perspective. My name is Tracy.
Well, the reason I'm saying that
Yes,
is
darling.
because what you said was so profound about black on black.
Yeah.
First of all, we have to stop being
Just speak in the microphone. That way they can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to stop being competitive. Stop competing with each other and have confidence in who you are.
Elaborate.
Elaborate. If you have confidence in who you are,
There's
you don't
no
have
need.
to compete with the next person.
No, of course not.
And in answer to his
Gorham.
brother over here, Gordon?
Gorham.
Gorham.
Yeah.
Mr. Gorham, that is what's happening with the black on black.
No, I think it's more than that.
Uh-oh.
There are some black folks that cannot stand the fact that they ain't where they think they should be.
Well, yeah.
Now, that's one thing.
But that's people, everybody. But okay.
Exactly.
Wait a minute. I see it perhaps differently than a lot of you see it because I see it professionally. And I see it professionally all of the time.
Are you trying to say we ain't professional?
No.
I'm playing. I can play with Gorham like that.
What exactly do you see
Yeah.
in your professional role?
Yeah. That
Okay,
you're-
I'm a retired Army officer.
Okay.
And when somebody, retarded, and when somebody finds that out, they take that and try to escalate it for their own. Let me just give you the example I'm talking about. I'm getting off an airplane at Dulles Airport last Friday. And I'm going through line A of TSA. And a nice little young white lady says, "Sir, are you over 75?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." She said, "Good, and you don't have to take your shoes off." I said, "Thank you, I realize that." 3 doors down the road, a black lady hollers at me all the way to line A and said, "Hey, you gotta take your shoes off." And I was tired because I just finished flying 20 hours. I didn't say anything. I said, "No, ma'am, this lady told me I'm okay." And she said, "Oh no, you gotta take your shoes off." I mean, she's loud and boisterous, okay? Now I have my African American wife with me who's kicking me the whole time saying, "Do not say anything. Do not open your mouth. Do not say a thing." And I said, "The hell with that." I called the supervisor over there who happened to be an Indian lady and said, "What in the hell is she hollering at me about way over yonder where this lady already told me to go through?"
Was it a TSA agent yelling at you?
Yeah. Who happened to be black. Who happened to be black. And I was trying to figure out, I was dressed absolutely poorly, so she couldn't have told jack squat about me. But I was trying to figure out, ma'am, why was she hollering at me to take my shoes off when I've already did this thing with this lady?
I would agree. That was a power trip. That was a straight up power trip.
I understand. But I see this power trip more than once. I see these TSA guys. Next example, the guy asked me, "May I see your passport?" "Hell no, you're not going to see my passport. You're TSA. You're not customs." "Well, I want to see your passport so I can make sure you can leave your shoes on." I said, "I just told you I'm over 75.
I used to work for TSA, and you don't have to show your passport.
I know it.
Take your shoes off.
I know it. And see, they thank people that come. They
So
think through,
this
what Bert,
is
you were saying, they
power.
think people come through
That's
there
power.
and they don't know what the hell they're talking about
But-
or what they're doing. I can't power trip after airplane ride.